Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Amy, and I'm originally from the Derby in the East Midlands. Okay, well, I come from a very small family, and traditionally an English and Irish family, and my family are Christian, but we've never practiced the faith at all. I learnt most about Christianity at school, and I always believed in God. I always thought it made sense that the world around me had a creator, and I found school life quite difficult. I found dealing with the other kids and the teachers as well kind of gave me a really hard time for a few years. But it wasn't until I actually moved to high school that things started to improve. I was getting the support from my teachers, and I'd started to make friends and felt more kind of comfortable within myself. And at this point, like, I was more agnostic than anything else, because of course I believed in God, but in my view, from kind of my earlier childhood experiences, I didn't want to worship God because I just thought God wanted to punish us and make us suffer and make us sad. So I just didn't want anything to do with religion at all. And especially like when I started doing my GCSE in religious studies, we primarily looked at Christianity, and I found that I had so many problems with so many of the Christian doctrines, and in my heart, I just could not accept. Well, I never really came over those difficulties, really. I just struggled just interacting with the other students at my school, and dealing with the pressure as well that was put upon us to succeed. Pretty much from the age of 11 onwards, everything became about exams, and kind of the way I felt about it was, if I didn't pass this exam, then I was a failure. And every time I did well in a test, I would feel like I had some self-worth. I had no self-esteem as a young teenager. I was very self-conscious, and I was very anxious as well, because I'd suffered a lot from bullying when I was very little, and it really did impact me on how I was with other people. So I had enormous social anxiety, and kind of over the years as well, like, I quickly developed depression, and I was diagnosed with it when I was about 15 or 16. And it just got to a point where, like, I didn't really want anything to do with life. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to do my exams. I didn't have the time for it anymore. I didn't see the point of it, Well, from a young age at my primary school, we were taught about Christianity, but I was at an age where I kind of just believed everything that my teacher told me. But kind of as I grew up and I started doing my GCSEs, that was the first time I was really looking at Christianity, like, with a more kind of maturer and more kind of critical academic kind of eye. And the biggest problem I had was the issue of the Trinity. Like, it just did not make sense to me that God would almost kind of split himself up into three parts. And kind of from my point of view, like, if God is supposed to be just, and if he wants people to succeed and go to heaven, then the concept of God has to be easy to understand. Any human being, no matter what age or for what country they're from, what race, whatever kind of education they have, they need to understand that concept, because if they don't understand the concept of God, then surely they cannot succeed. And, I just think if you go out and ask any person on the street, I think most people wouldn't be able to explain the Trinity, and they wouldn't be able to understand it, let alone if you had just a little 8-year-old kid and you were trying to explain it to it. So that was the biggest problem for me. And I think the issue about Jesus alayhi salam being the Son of God, he always struck me as a prophet, and from the parts of the Bible that I had read, I only started reading the Bible when I was about 18, but before that, the bits that I had read, there was nothing that was convincing me that he was more than a man. He was doing things that normal men did. He was praying, he was eating, he was drinking. You know, he just seemed like a normal man who was trying to portray a message, and I found it very difficult to see God in such a weak and, you know, just a weak human being. It didn't make sense to me at all. Well, when I was 17, I met my first boyfriend, and he was actually a Sunni Muslim. He wasn't practicing though. And I was with him for 2 years, and when I was 18, he proposed to me, and we planned on getting married when I had finished university. And he was the first introduction to Islam that I ever had, and he said to me, like, would you ever consider being a Muslim? Because he wanted his wife to be a Muslim, and he told me a few things, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll go and read about it. I didn't know anything about Islam. I'd heard about things like 9/11 on the news, but to me that didn't make me kind of scared or didn't make me feel any kind of hatred towards Muslims. I didn't know enough to form an opinion. So I started to read, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised at what I found. And I was actually really impressed with the simplicity of Islam and the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa. So I turned to him and I said, yeah, I would be happy to become a Muslim. And you know, I was doing it for completely the wrong reasons. I wasn't doing it to impress Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like I should have been doing. But kind of in my younger, more naive years, I was doing it to impress him, you know, because he was such a big and important part of my life. I just wanted to impress him. And so I just started to practice it very, very slowly. But what hindered me was basically this relationship that I was in was a very volatile relationship. He was quite abusive with me on various occasions. It was a really difficult time for me to deal with. And basically it just got to a point when the abuse was just getting too much. He just tried to hurt me in any way that a person could hurt you, and I had to leave that relationship, and it broke me because that was it. That was my entire future gone. I'd planned a wedding, I'd planned a future with him, and all that was gone, and I didn't know what to do now. And like, I just didn't have that strength to hold on to Islam. And I tried, you know, part of me tried. I tried to go to several different Sunni masjids in my area, and actually found quite a lot of discrimination against me. I'd go to the masjid, I'd go into the sisters section, I'd be, you know, modestly dressed, or wouldn't be doing anything wrong, but like the looks and the whispers that I would get from the men at these masjids just made me feel so uncomfortable, and like I just didn't like being there, and I just couldn't wait to get out. And I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was because I was English, I didn't know if it was because I was a woman, I just didn't know. And kind of with my ex-fiance and this experiences with these men, I started to have a negative picture of Islam, and I started to think, well, this is how Muslims really are. And it kind of just left a vacuum in me. I wanted this spirituality, but Islam was gone, so I had to find something else. So what happened was, I was at university in my second year, and I had quite a lot of Christian friends, and you know, mashallah, they were such a rock to me during the time after I broke up with my fiance, because I was such a wreck. And even though I was getting treatment for it, like, just the emotional trauma of everything was so great, and they kind of comforted me in a way, and they taught me a bit more about Christianity, and they said, you know, just give it a chance. And I thought, okay, well, I might as well give Christianity a proper chance. And I did. For about half a year, I would say, I was practicing Christianity. I was reading as much as I could. I started going to church, just doing whatever I could. And I just found, like, it didn't help that emptiness. It wasn't helping kind of to heal me in a way. In fact, as the months went on after this breakup, I was getting worse and worse. There were times when I just wasn't leaving the house. I was just so mentally sick and scarred that I just couldn't face the world, and I just wasn't getting any comfort from Christianity, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought it was my fault, you know, that I wasn't getting that comfort. But it kind of took me until kind of the end of the summer, and I realised why it wasn't working for me, and it was because I knew in my heart I didn't believe what my Christian friends believed necessarily. I think, like, even at an older age, I started reading the Bible again when I was 18. Even then, I was still having the same issues. I was questioning myself, is Jesus really the Son of God? You know, is it true, or was he just a man? Because, you know, part of me was fearful about it, because I knew from knowing about Islam, I knew that one of the greatest sin that you can commit is shirk, and believing in a God other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, you know, I was scared of that. I didn't want to make that mistake, and I just wasn't certain. And I would read the Gospels, and from what Jesus alayhi salam said, like, there were implicit things that could suggest that he was the Son of God, but they were not explicit enough for me. I felt, you know, this is to do with salvation. God has to be explicit, otherwise it just wouldn't be fair. And then pretty much after I'd read the Gospels and I moved on to Acts and the letters of Paul, I felt there was kind of a shift almost, because up until this point, I didn't really know much about the Apostle Paul. But this shift, it was saying that more explicitly who Jesus was. And I don't know, part of me wanted to believe it, but at the same time, I just felt like I couldn't, in a way, and it was difficult. And I would go and I'd talk to, like, my friends, and talk to my priest as well, and just say, you know, I'm still struggling with this concept of the Trinity. And, like, they spent many hours talking to me about it and trying to explain it to me. They were using things like the egg thing and God knows what else, and it didn't sink in. It just didn't go. And I think the way I practiced as a Christian, I very much practiced as a monotheistic, you know, like, I just kind of depended on God, and I just saw Jesus as, like, an inspiration of how to live, how to treat people in a way, more than seeing him as this godlike figure. It was strange because I began to miss Islam towards the end of that summer. The one day I had a dream, and I was in this masjid that I'd visited when I was in Egypt, and I'd gone to it myself because my fiancé was busy doing something else, and I'd gone for Maghrib prayers, and I was just sitting there waiting for the adhan. And when I woke up from that dream, like, I just felt such a sense of loss, like I just missed it so much, and I felt like I wanted to pray again.